Welcome to Devil's Trap Podcast. I'm Liz. Diana is off doing something fun, but she'll be in this in a minute. Just wanted to let you know, if you are watching this on YouTube, this is lore and more lore from season 9, episode 8, A Rock in a Hard Place on Vesta and the Vestal Virgins. So enjoy.
So we're going to talk about Vesta, and we're also going to talk about the Vestal Virgins. And
This lore?
So this is lore. And I give a little caveat because much of what we know is derived from historical accounts from people who sometimes, had agendas because they were people and they were dudes writing about things that happened, right? And so sometimes people want to write things to make certain people look better than others. People are also less likely to document the mundane events. Even back then, it was clickbait, right? Also, the Vestal Virgins existed over basically like 1,000 years. So some of the things that we talk about are going to kind of jump in and out of that. And because we don't have time to talk about 1,000 years of history. So look at things like a fuzzy lens, wish for a time machine so we can learn the truth, even though time travel is stupid. Let's start with the goddess Vesta. So I don't like to say mean things about other women, especially when they are goddesses. But Vesta is kind of boring. She was just compared to the other goddesses. I mean, she was important to Rome, but as a deity, I'm immediately regretting what I typed here when I'm about to say, but I can't help it. And she is a trad wife goddess. And that is probably because the dudes writing about her loved a trad Roman wife. Like, that's really the epitome of what they wanted, traditional Roman values, right? Anyways, she was about virginity and being chaste. And, that's not a fun sometimes, right? She was also an eternal virgin. And all I can hear is like, you're a virgin who can't drive. And she was the goddess over hearth and home. She also symbolized faith, family, and domestic order. So that is a very important thing to have domestic tranquility. It just doesn't make for really exciting mythological stories, right? So there's a story about her with a donkey in it, and that's not even that fun. And there's a donkey. It's basically Vesta, right? Sort of boring goddess. And a big temple was erected for her in the Roman Forum. In the 8th century BC, King Numa Pompilus created the Vestal Virgins, created the songs.
Right.
And so basically, these ladies are the priestesses who are there to care for the temple dedicated to Vesta, and also really to care for the sacred eternal. This is what the Bengals were talking about. I think this is what that song was actually about.
Yeah.
So the sacred eternal flame, the ignis eternal. Also, I'm not worried about mispronouncing Latin because it's a dead language and you don't know how it was supposed to sound anyway, so fuck off. All right, and so this flame, though, represented the prosperity of Rome. And if it went out, it was supposed to be like the downfall of Rome. If somebody looked into a crystal ball at one point, it was like, oh, if this goes out, Rome dies. So the Vestal Virgins had the responsibility of ensuring that it didn't go out. If that did happen on their watch, they would get the shit beat out of them. They said with the year 297 BCE, the thing went out. A lot of things were going on at that time. So Rome was really afraid if this went out, that everybody was going to die.
Right.
So in order to make the people feel better, the Ponce of whatever, the big priest dude, was like, we have to beat her to make people feel better. He did. So we've got the symbol for Vesta and these unpenetrated virgins, which are symbolic for how Rome was unpenetrated. It becomes this very like gross dude thing. So they're like Rome, right? Nobody's penetrated us, just like these virgin ladies. So Jody was correct. There was typically 6 of them, and they were selected from the super elite families. If you know anything about Rome, they had a big class thing with the patricians and the plebeians, and then there's people underneath the plebeians too. But plebeians, like working class, patricians, like your upper class, your nobility. So Vestal Virgins had to be a girl who was between 6 to 10 years old. And I don't think you had 6 to 10, she had a lot of autonomy in whether or not she was going to be
She didn't
doing
have a
this
choice.
lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
But it wasn't probably that terrible for her. We'll get to that why in a minute. But so once they were selected, she would be committed to serving as a Vestal for the next 30 years. And it'd be broken into 10-year chunks. 10 years to learn, 10 years to do, and 10 years to teach, which I don't think is a bad system, right?
It's actually pretty decent. That's a pretty solid system.
I think it's a good system. And then after those 30 years, you could fuck off and go get married if you wanted to. You could finally lose that big V card. And there's like, this is the day. But
well, like what was the age span though at that time? I mean, like it wasn't much over like 40, right? I mean, so
well, but they were ones who did live longer because there were priestesses.
They had the good life.
You're right. They were living the good life. They were generally from the upper class. They have like all the good stuff. But some priestesses ended up staying for over 50 years. So to be selected, like I said, it was an honor. They had rights that other women did not have, which was just idiot. So a Vestal could handle her own money. She could buy and sell property. She could free slaves. She could accept inheritances. She could basically be a notary. She was in charge of holding people's wills. She could testify in court. She could have a voice in the Senate. No other lady in Rome could do this. Like rich ladies couldn't even leave their houses without somebody with them. Like women in Rome couldn't do jack shit. And the Vestal Virgins were pretty well off financially. We know that they got gifts to the royal family and other benefactors. They found inscribed pedestals at the temples with inscriptions thanking individual Vestals to their support, which I think is neat. It's even like you go to like the Botanical Gardens and there'll be like a bench for like Peter and stuff. But like that was happening even back then. It's like sometimes like some things just don't change, right?
Yeah.
And so they also had a lot of rental property. There were like shops in front of where they lived that they could rent out. They, like I said, they could actually own property. They had money. But there also isn't a lot of details about how they spent it because they were women and people didn't care about that. So when we hear about them again, it's kind of when they were bad or when other things happen. So bear that in mind. But we do know because they have the ability to write wills and to leave money to people, including women, that there were Vestal Virgin dynasties. Aunts passing this on to like nieces and stuff, which is, I mean, it's elitist but cool, right? It's how these women are fighting to have power in this place that, that you can't really do it. So to be a candidate though, I mean, again, these are little girls. They're between 6 to 10. Their body had to be physically perfect in every respect. Both of the parents needed to be living, although I think these roles shifted over like 1,000.
Yeah, probably political.
So both parents had to be living, and neither could have been divorced, have been a slave, or be engaged in negotia sordida, which is, sordid negotiation. So like you couldn't be like a gambler. And like the slave thing is interesting too, just because in Rome, if you got into debt and you couldn't pay it off, you could become a slave, right? And so you could be moving through that class system. But once you did that, you're out of line for this position. You couldn't have any speech impediments. Your father must have a residence in Italy. And if your sister was chosen, you could be exempt. So some of this does become kind of Hunger Games type situations, In the end, they had to be absolutely chaste, and they do have to take that vow of chastity to be a virgin for as long as they are a priestess. Because again, they're representing Rome being pure and unpenetrated, right? So they have to do that. Besides just being virginally chaste, is also that idea of being morally pure.
Right.
And we'll talk about
was it so strong and so pure?
Stay strong, stay pure.
That's what it was.
And when she got selected, the Pontifex Maximus would point at her. Oh, and she's sitting on her dad's lap because that's not creepy at all. And so she's sitting on her dad's lap, and the Pontifex Maximus points at her, and then he takes her away by the hand, and it's imitating her being captured in battle. It's called the Captio. And in a wedding ceremony, she would have sat on her mother's lap. So in this one, she sits on her father's. And so if you lived in Rome and you were a woman, you were always owned by a man. So every family, every clan had this pater familias, right? So he was like the head patriarch dude. If it was your dad while you're growing up, he's the one who had control over you. And then as you got married, then that control would shift to your husband. But with the virgins, what ends up happening with them is they end up basically kind of shifting to the state. No man ever takes them over, just Rome. But again, it was very important that they stayed chaste. And if they lost that, then they were accused of something called incestum. And that was treasonous against Rome and sounds like incest. Because basically you're fucking, your family because you're Rome. So anyone you fuck is, but losing her virginity could be the downfall of the entire nation. And it's hot, right? If you're just like, man, if we have sex, like, whole country could fall. Like, tell me not to touch that hot stove, right? And so,
the do not touch button.
The do not touch this red button, right? First, it like, the punishment's gonna be like a stoning. But then Tarquin Elder, the king, he was this king, he was like, well, no, we're gonna do the stoning, we're gonna do a beating, and then we're gonna bury them alive.
Oh no.
So I'll get into more details about that in more lore. So she would be accused of incest and told to stop doing her rites, making financial moves like selling slaves. Usually you're going on trial. So she would have a trial, be judged by the pontifexes, the priests, and a tribunal. And if she was found guilty, then she would be buried alive. There were women who were found innocent and then had to get retried to be found guilty just to make the public happy. Beyond that, as times went on, the Vestals just became more and more enshrined with the royal houses and more enshrined with politics. One of the rights that they have, I think is really interesting, is they have the ability to be an intermediate between the state and people, which is a right that not anybody has. Talk more about that in a minute. But so these ladies had this really interesting role within politics. However, as Christianity became more popular within the Roman Empire, the Vestals became less so. And in 375 AD, the Emperor Gratian, whatever the fuck your name was, he took away the Vestals' privileges and their property, and soon thereafter, the Vestals were rude. So that was the Vestal's basic, and now time for
some more lore.
A little bit into Vesta's mythology that I wanted to talk about. So the first thing, remember I said that Vesta the goddess had a thing with a donkey, and it was still kind of boring. So this comes from Ovid.
Hold on, you're starting off with a donkey story. I'm like, I don't think that's just going to be boring.
I'm sure. I want to hear your opinion on this. Okay. I'm also going to tell you, this is still a entertainment production. I'm not going to try and bore an audience. So
no, of course.
This comes from Ovid's Fasti, and I found it on Mythopedia. So Vesta was invited to a dinner party by Cybele. In Rome, she was considered a mother goddess. So anyhow, everyone is there and they're getting wasted because that is what gods and goddesses do at dinner parties. Vesta goes to find somewhere to sleep, and it's unclear if she is also inebriated. Then the nature deity Priapus, which I believe is also the name of an erection dysfunctional drug, or maybe just what happens to a penis when it can't comes down. I think that is. But so he was often really known to have a giant erection. And so he decides that he's going to try and rape Vesta, who is like passed out, and because he's gross. But there was a donkey who had escaped, and so at that time he was like hee-haw, or whatever donkey noise he makes, and that wakes up Vesta, and then Vesta wakes up and she screams, and she doesn't lose her virginity. Priapus is scolded and banned from future dinner parties. See, I told you it's
a good donkey.
I kept reading. There is a much more interesting story where Vesta impregnates Rhea Silva, the Vestal priestess and the mother of Romulus and Remulus, with a magical phallus that appeared in the flames of the sacred hearth. But I have only seen it in reference. So if you know where the full story is, please send it to me. And the broader thing is like Romulus and Remulus, like in the other version, raped by Mars. And then the kids get thrown into the Tiber. They suck on a wolf. And then they get raised by shepherds and they lead a revolt against their uncle and put another uncle on the throne because they're wrong. But so I want to know about this magical phallus that was in the fire. Like, and like, did she have to put her hand like in the fire? I want to know more about the dick magic.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. Something I think that you would be very interested in is how they dressed. Now remember, like these are like the elitist of Roman ladies, right? They had to be like perfect, but they also had to be modest, right? Nobody can touch us, but we're perfect.
And it was pretty warm.
It was pretty warm. And Rome was very picky, like just overall, and they just like to dictate on what you could wear based on what class you were, right? And Vestals would wear their hair in the Sexcrinus style. And so the Sexcrinus is a style of 6 braids that are braided, and that is something that the Virginies would wear. But when the hairstylist archaeologist Janet Stevens, because that's a fucking job that Janet Stevens has. She has this really great video where she was looking at different sculptures and figuring out what their hairstyle was. So she goes through and recreates it and shows you how to do the actual hairstyle if you wanted it. You cannot do it because it involves 7 braids. And so we'd have to have a lot of extensions.
Yeah. Like I don't have enough hair for any of those things.
So
they would call me a witch and throw me in a fire.
So anyhow, they basically just their very modest hair. They had to wear no sexy togas, right? They got the stola, which is a very long, pleated, sleeveless robe. Picture what the Statue of Liberty wears.
They got to wear muumuus.
Yeah, basically wearing muumuus.
Caftans.
Right? Caftans, right? And only they and the matronate class got to wear those sheets. Okay. And so they also wear the ceremonial headbands, the fashion, which I learned. I was excited to learn that's a broad band that's wrapped around the body. And so they had to wear that, a tunica, just means a cord or a girdle, and then also the headband and a veil. And so she's in these comfy clothes, but it's a lot of fabric for fire. But also, like, where like most of the things were kept, which were kept in the penis. And I told you I'm pronouncing this Latin whichever fucking way I want to. They were kept in the penis, that's spelled Penus, aka the storeroom within the temple. And nobody is allowed in this but the virgins. And really like where like all the shit goes down. Men are never allowed in there. And it's just a women's place. And so like I guarantee you all this stuff that catches on fire, it was gone as soon as they walked in the door. Like that girdle, that bra thing, whatever, like that was off as soon as they walked in. Like that bra was flung across the room. It was just like hanging shit from like torches and whatever. All right. So again, the penis. So once you become a Vestal, one of her most important responsibility was to care for that penis located within the temple and its contents. And those contents can be anything from like the willows they were documenting to the ritual ingredients like the mola salsa they made 3 times a year. MOLASALSA. So that is basically a thing that is made from spelt flour mixed with salt and kind of sounds like a pasty thing. But it gets used in some of their festivals that we're going to talk about. Okay, so the Vestals had a lot of festivals that they needed to participate in. And they started off with their New Year's rites, and that was on March 1st. So that's in Rome, March 1st is New Year's. And basically that meant the temple had to be cleaned. And that was just a lot of, I'm sure that we know.
Spring cleaning.
But then so New Year's Day, temple gets cleaned out, like gets refreshed, a new fire gets rekindled. But you're right, it absolutely is. And spring cleaning is where we get a lot of this from. Because that's just what humans do. Like, you just need a time once a year to be like, we're going to clean shit up. Then after that was the Forticidia. That took place in April. At this festival, a pregnant cow was sacrificed at the Citadel of Jupiter on behalf of the state. And another 30 pregnant cows, one for each curia, basically like a council or neighborhood, were also sacrificed. And note I say pregnant cows. So the one that was at the Citadel of Jupiter, that one, the calf gets pulled out of the stomach of the dead mama cow. And then the head priestess got the joy of burning that. And then she's going to use that, keep that ash for later in the year. And then like the other 30 ones, right? So all over someone's killing a pregnant cow and then dragging these calf fetuses from there to a central place where then the Vestals can burn them and use that ash to purify people. These fucking Romans. All right. So after that, there was the Vestalia, which was the Vestal's festival that happened June 7th through June 15th. The temple was open to the women of Rome. The donkeys had a mysterious role in the Vestalia festivals. And according to Robin Wildfang's Roman Vestal Virgins, donkeys were, quote, decorated with loaves of bread.
Bread donkeys?
I guess. And then also there's a milk. They think that this milk could be related to the mysterious ass that appears in the rites of the Vestalia.
Mysterious ass.
There's a mysterious, this donkey is a mysterious ass. So
I just like that we're talking about virgins and their Vestal festival, and now we've got some mysterious ass.
Mysterious ass. So later on, my friends are not Diana. Got many texts about mysterious ass building up to me writing this. Okay, so now we have mysterious ass. Then comes the October horse. So every October, 2 races were held in the area of Rome that was set aside for Mars, and the right-hand horse of the winning team was speared and then sacrificed. Neighbors would fight over who got to keep the head and display it because fucking Rome. And then the blood, to be fair, Rome ate horses all the time. So they ate cows too, but still gross dudes. And the blood of the horse's tail, though, that was for the Vestals, and that we pour in the hearth, and that becomes an ingredient for something. For the Perilia. So that's the next festival, and during that, people jump over the flames in a triple row, shaking their damp laurel, which I thought was competing with the yam shaking that we had a couple weeks ago. So in this one, there's like someone who jumps over fire 3 times, and they shake their laurels.
Okay.
And the Vestals would hang out fumigants made from the calf ash and the horse blood that they kept from those things. That they're like, remember that gross shit we did a couple of months ago? We just wanted to remind you, and now we want you to smell like it. Smell like this dead cow, motherfucker. Yeah. So there are also the rites of Argai, where the Vestals would throw 24 to 30 straw effigies into the Tiber River, maybe to get rid of the ghosts and spirits that came out during Lemuria that happened before it. But the Vestals always had to use running water. Like the water always had to be flowing if you were going to use it in a rite. And they actually created some cool like fountains and shit that had
so they couldn't have still water. They had to be moving.
Yeah, so it's like your cat has to drink out of a perpetual fountain, like the Vestal Virgins are like your cats in that way.
No. Okay.
And they also, just because the Tiber was flowing, they use that to like, oh, we've got something that's unclean, so let's throw it in here. Like, hey, we've got this rapist criminal that we just murdered and executed. He's unclean. Let's throw his corpse in this river. Hey, you want to get some water?
I'm thirsty.
Yeah, so that's the Tiber. And so more incestum. So as a reminder, incestum is when a virgin was accused of losing her virginity or her chastity. So when that one happened and she would be found guilty, she would then be dressed in funeral garments, bound hand and foot, and put into a closed litter, not like the kitty litter box, like the things that, like the things that people carry around on. She would be put in a closed litter and then proceeded around with their friends and family like at a funeral. Then they will take her to her chamber hole. And when they get to the chamber hole, the Pontifex Maximus would put a ladder into the chamber. Down in the chamber, there was a bed, blankets, a lighted lamp, water, bread, milk, and oil. And this is where the mysterious ass milk comes in. Because it wasn't necessarily cow's milk, it could have been the ass milk. Because all these things had to maybe do with Vestal rites.
Right.
So they could be saying either you can do these rites while you die, or these are the rites that you done fucked up.
Right. Yeah.
Also, I like that you use ass milk in a ritual. So as soon as her foot hits that ladder, the priests all shun her and they just turn away. Then they remove the ladder and then they filled in the hole. So she would just be in this whole kind of similar to what ends up happening in this episode. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. I just think that was interesting. Caddy counted out of all the Vestal Virgins 11 instances of recorded executions because of unchastity. So, last thing before we go, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Vestals who died for being unchaste. So, our first one,
Unclean.
unclean. So the I'm sorry, not a
Vegetables?
vegetable, the vegetable. Well, because her name is the Vestal Panaria, and it kind of has been reminding me of Panera. So
I just want a bread bowl.
I just want a bread bowl.
Hold the donkey, hold the ass milk.
Oh, no ass milk on my bread bowl. Okay.
Sorry.
So she is the first one who is said to have been buried alive by King Tarquinius Priscus, who allegedly had a dream that was telling him this was a punishment that the Vestals deserved. The
Great.
next Vestal in 483 BCE, who we'll call Vestal Appia, was accused because there was ominous portents that people were seeing. I'm assuming like cattle mutilations or something. So like people just thought that bad things were going to happen. So
Right.
they assumed if bad things were happening, it must be the Vestal's fault. In 427 BCE, there was a plague, which was mainly affecting pregnant women. And so a slave informed the priest that a Vestal had been unchaste. And so that Vestal, her name was either Urbina or Urbinia, she was tried, convicted, scourged, and buried alive. She had 2 lepers. One of them killed herself, and the other was beaten to death. It is said that the plague ceased immediately afterwards. So,
I mean, sometimes you do gotta do what you gotta do.
So in 420 BCE, the Vestal Postuma was accused but acquitted. She had raised suspicions because of her too elegant dress and a manner freer than was suitable for a virgin. She was remanded and ordered by the Pontifex Maximus to abstain from joking and to practice holiness rather than elegance in her appearance. I want to know what
Not
your set
appreciate
was
her
like,
humor.
Miss Postumia.
Not
So
appreciate her humor.
in 337 BCE, Vestal Minutia was also accused because of her appearance. Unfortunately, she was buried alive. Again, there was patricians and plebeian power show going on, and she was coming from a plebeian family. So they think maybe that could have been them saying that you shouldn't be here in such a high place.
Right.
Okay, next is my favorite and the one that definitely needs a Netflix series only because of her name, and that is the Vestal Sextilia. We don't know why she was buried, but I hope it was a good reason. I hope she had a good time. Also, during that time, there was the Vestal Tuccia, and she was accused, but she was saved because she carried a sieve full of water to the river without spilling a drop. Good for her. In 216 BCE, the women of Rome started acting up, and they were creating a ruckus in the streets mourning for their dead husbands. And this was during the Battle of Cannae. And the Senate had decided not to ransom the captives that came out of that. And the wives were upset and they had something to say. So 2 Vestal Virgins got buried alive because Vestal Amelia was accused and she was saved because she put her garment on the hearth and then the fire went out and then she relit the heart from the ashes and that proved that she was a virgin.
What?
Yeah, Romans. Then, unfortunately for many, in 114 BCE, lightning hit this knight's daughter, and it not only killed her, but it just blew all her clothes off, and so she's just lying, and like she's just naked, dead, and her feet are just like all twisted around, and they're like, "Fuck! Like this is an omen. Something's gonna happen." Clearly, these vessels are fucking. So they accused 3 of them. They accused Marcia, Amelia, and Licinia. Amelia was a patrician, and Licinia was a plebeian, and the other one was a patrician. Okay, so Amelia and Licinia were accused of banging the other's brothers and of having group sex. Marcia was just accused of having the one lover. So they have this trial, and then only Marcia is found guilty. So Marcia gets buried alive. Then the public was so mad because they were just like, during the trial, they were literally saying like, yeah, the aristocracy knows this shit is happening. And so the people were like, the fuck? And they're like, fine, we'll have another child, we'll bury them alive too. So then they buried the other 2 alive. They had to do a bunch of rituals to try and cleanse all the eternal flame. And they did bury 4 men alive.
Okay.
So at least we got some dudes there. Then in 73 BCE, 2 Vestals, Fabia and Lucinia, were separately accused. This was also during a class war, but those 2 hired 2 really good lawyers, like the famous Cadoux, not that one, and those were acquitted. And under Domitian, Emperor 81 to 96 BCE, 4 Vestals were tried for incestum. 3 were convicted, the Vestal Veronilla and the sisters Oculate, and 1 found innocent. The public was really mad because there was another one, Cornelia. She was tried in absentia and wasn't even there to face her
accusers.
But it didn't matter because they tried her again and found her guilty. So, and then as she was the Virga Maxima, so she was the head of the order. And as she was going down to her crypt or her chamber, her stola caught and she turned and collected herself. And the executioner tried to give her a hand, and she was just like, no.
No, sir.
No, sir.
The final executed Vestals we're going to speak about were killed in about 212 CE after being accused by the teenaged Emperor Caracalla, or Caracalla, or however you say his gross name, because if the stories about him were true, he was just a piece of shit. So he allegedly raped the Vestal Virgin Clodia Laeta, then accused her of incestum. In addition, to help cover his crime, he accused the 3 Vestal witnesses, Pompon Regina, Aurelia Severa, and Canutia Crescentia. All 4 of these Vestals were tried, but no men, oddly, were accused of having participated in the act. One of the condemned, Canutia Crescentia, committed suicide before the execution. On the way to her death, Clodia is said to have screamed her innocence and hurled accusations at Caracalla for knowing that none of this was her fault and that it was his.
Well, yeah, that is the more lore for the Vestals.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really,
for as boring as Vesta is, it's wild.
For as boring as Vesta is, sorry, lady, but sometimes you need to be boring.
That's fine.
Sometimes,
no judgment. They don't all need to be. These gods are all real rapey.
Just needs to be clean. Sometimes, I just need a clean hearth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's a reason to be stealing a bunch of cow babies, but we all gotta do our thing. But
yeah.
But it's still really shitty that at times when things were bad, the solution was let's kill some fucking women. Yeah. And it seems to be a theme that occurs throughout history that I would very much like to go away. Is that too much to ask?
Devil's Trap Podcast is a Don't Get It production. Meow.
Devil's Trap Podcast is part of the Ship It Studios podcast network. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Devil's Trap Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Devil's Trap Podcast, Twitter at Devil's Trap Pod, or you can email us at devilstrap@devilstrappodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe, leave reviews, and share with all your friends. We're at all your favorite podcast outlets and at devilstrappodcast.com. I'm Babe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.